Thank you. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Shabbat Shalom. This is a really good-looking Repro Shabbat group. I'm excited about the new coin term, Repro Shabbat, so I'm going to be using that. I wanted to talk mostly about three things today. One, I was going to talk a little bit personally, how I kind of came into this work, because it's deeply connected to my Judaism and my experience of growing up as a Jewish kid. Two, I'm going to kind of lay bare the current landscape we're in. It's not pretty, but we're going to end on how we're going to collectively save democracy. So it's gonna go up, right? Because I fundamentally believe the fight for abortion access is the fight for a thriving and healthy democracy. And I don't just think that because I do this work. I know that because I see on the ground, at its core, what happens when democracies start to crumble. And one of the first things to go is women's control over their own bodies. It's just historically a fact. And so while some folks might care about abortion rights, some folks might be focused on gun rights, some folks might be focused on the environment, that's all good. We are all a part of the same project because none of those things are saved, none of those things happen, none of the world we want can exist if we do not have a thriving democracy. So a little bit about how I got into this work. I don't know if you were like me, I grew up in a home where our holiday tables were partial observation of whatever holiday it was, and the other half, or maybe even 3/4, was political debate. My grandfather was a leader of a retail workers union, and he fought mostly for women workers, for fair pay, equal pay. And we used to sit at the holiday tables, and he would sit at the head of the table, and he would slam his hand on the desk and say, there's fair, and there is just, and there is righteousness, and that is the side that we must be on. So sitting in that table, sitting at that room, my kind of view of the world was shaped. There was a lot of debate, a lot of argument. It was at that table I decided I needed to go to law school to up my game so I can come back to the table. But it was really something else having to do with my grandfather that kind of, almost forced me into this work. We used to go for the high holidays to the Belrose Jewish Center on Union Turnpike, where he was a member. He always sat in the front row. As a union leader, he was, I guess, given a good seat. And I remember around 7 or 8 years old, just like coming to the realization during one of the services that there were no women on the bima. And I remember leaning over and asking my dad, why, am I allowed on the bima? No. Girls were not allowed on the bima. So this is my same grandfather who fought every day to support working women getting a fair wage and who named what's just and what's right. And I was sitting in this house of worship, and I was not allowed on the bima. It was the first time I remember feeling an actual, I'm not allowed to do something because I'm a girl. This was going to be a problem. What was I going to do about it? So to me, I start processing how do you have power in this moment? I don't think I was using these words, but in my head I was like, oh, this needs to change. How am I going to change the rule in this whole synagogue, right? So I would, on the way to synagogue and on the way home, constantly talk about it. It made my parents very uncomfortable. I brought it to the holiday table, right? That was where everybody quiet. It was uncomfortable. So I decided in that moment that my 8-year-old self, my power, was going to be making everyone extremely uncomfortable. And we would go into services and we would sit in the second row and they would spend most of the time watching me to make sure I did not stand up in the middle and embarrass them. And I thought, this is good. I like this. I like this feeling. I like this feeling of having some sort of power to express the injustice that I was feeling. So fast forward, I work at Planned Parenthood. I spend almost a decade telling people that Roe is going to fall and being completely ignored. It was just hard for us to fathom. And now, 21 states have abortion bans on the books. 14 of those states are full-out abortion bans. There are thousands of people right now in an actual forced pregnancy. I don't know how many people in here have ever been pregnant when they don't want to be pregnant. It is an actual trauma. And so we are talking about thousands of traumatized people trying to get care or just knowing they're not going to get care. But what are some of the other things that we've seen on the ground? First of all, the top 10 states with the highest maternal mortality rates have abortion bans. They are mostly in the South. We see the impact on communities and families, particularly poor, Black and brown communities who do not have access to care, who do not have the resources to fly 3 states away. They are being forced into giving birth. So I think about this a lot. Folks ask me a lot, like, what is this about? And I will say it is such an honor and a privilege to be in your own house of worship when you spend most of your day fighting Christian fundamentalism and white supremacy, to be in your own house of worship, the pride I feel. We are not just talking about it, we are celebrating it. But I've just been thinking, like, what is this about? Because we know it is not about life, right? I mean, like, literally, we are okay, this country is okay under these policies with seeing pregnant people die before we actually have laws and access to health care to support them to live in a thriving community. So what is this about? To me, it is all about control. And when we think about control, there is a direct line between access to abortion and the government's ability to control its civilians in fascist and authoritarian regimes. Hitler's Germany, Mussolini's Italy, the one-child policy, chattel slavery, they are all rooted in controlling sexual and reproductive health. And when you can control your population's bodies, you get to control many other aspects of their lives. So the fact that this is rooted in control should scare all of us. When we look at thriving democracies, not only are they good for women and marginalized communities, they are good for Jews. It is a direct threat to us, to our Jewish lives, to our independence, to our thriving communities, to live in societies that want to control people's bodies. And so this might not be your #1 issue. It might be something else. But it is our job to see the deep connections between the two. So what do we do about this, right? I've just kind of presented like what we thought was one problem, and now it's like an even bigger existential problem. So when I think back to my 8-year-old self and that kind of excitement I felt over having some level of power and control myself over making other folks uncomfortable with something that I just saw as completely unjust, I would ask us to think about our own power. I teach a class at Rutgers to public health professionals. So these are people like out in the workforce. And I always ask them when I start the class, how do you think about your own power? And most people are kind of uncomfortable with power. They think it's something that's used to kind of force other people to do bad things, and certainly it can be. But power inherently is neutral. It's not good, it's not bad. It certainly can be used for good, it certainly can be used for bad. But in this moment in time, you don't have to have a job at Planned Parenthood to exert your power in this space. You don't have to, work for a voting rights organization to care and fight for our democracy. I often think of a Dr. King quote when I think about power and my relationship to it. So Dr. King was like a master of understanding power and how to use it. He said, and I of course won't say it as eloquently, but he said, "Power properly understood is the ability to achieve purpose. It is the strength required to bring about social change." He goes on to say, and my favorite part, "Power without love is reckless and abusive, and love without power is sentimental and anemic." It is our job not just to love, not just to care about an issue, but to kind of hone our own power in fighting for it. The marriage of love and power can accomplish absolutely incredible things. And so how are we harnessing that ourselves? In this moment of crisis, it is our job to imagine something different, something new. It is true that under Roe v. Wade, we were in a much better situation than we are today. But the truth is that for many, many people, Roe was never enough. If you didn't have the money, if you didn't have access to a healthcare provider, it didn't matter if there was some constitutional protection to abortion. Before Roe v. Wade fell, there was 5 states with only 1 abortion clinic in the entire state. What is that? That's not access, and that was with Roe. So we now are in this position of imagining something new and imagining something different, and we're seeing it. We're seeing it all over the country. So at the state level, you're seeing ballot initiatives. When the issue of abortion access is brought directly to the people in the most purest democratic form of passing a ballot initiative, we win. Every time. It does not matter what state it is. That is an exercise of using democracy and creating a healthy democracy and making sure our voices are heard. So how do we go state by state in every state that it's possible to pass a ballot initiative, get it directly in a state constitution? You start to create a network of states where we don't have the national protection anymore, but how do we every year build where we are? How do we end up with 30 states with constitutional protections? How do we get to 35? That is the work that we need to do. Right now, the state of Florida, one of the largest abortion providers in the country and the entire global South, is on the precipice of having a 6-week abortion ban implemented. This November's ballot, there will be a ballot initiative getting rid of that. I mean, talk about our opportunities to exercise our power, our democracy, to make sure our voices are heard. I also think we should think about what it looks like to use our power to support people who are trying to get to care. Supporting local abortion funds, folks that are literally paying directly for people to travel and get care, that is using your power. Sometimes your power is your voice, sometimes your power is your vote, sometimes your power is your money. How are we using it? Then I want us to think about what could be completely different. I dream about Article 5 of the US Constitution, gives us the specific instructions on how to change it. We need to get comfortable with dreaming and building enough power to make sure our founding documents reflect who we are and what we want. We ultimately do not have a thriving democracy if we do not have access to abortion, if we do not have the ability to pass rational gun laws. We do not have a thriving democracy if we are not in a position to enact clear and simple environmental protections to be able to save our children and our grandchildren. So when I think about abortion access, and I think of the popularity of abortion access because it is popular, I think of it as a tool of building a healthy and prosperous democracy, one in which all of the things we care about, and one in which Jews are safe and thriving in. It's all deeply connected, and to me it is a part of the same project. So we have an election coming up, but we have a lot of other work to do. There's ballot initiatives all across the country. I think after this, during the Kiddush, I'll be available for questions, and I am happy to come up with your own, power plan of how you are going to, make people uncomfortable, even if it's your own family. Because we don't do this without collectively doing it together.